You know it's going to be a bad night when your wife spends 2 hours getting ready for a New Year's party at your own house and she won't even look at you while she's doing it. I'm Owen Barlow, 36 years old, IT project manager for a mid-sized consulting firm, and I should have seen the knife coming from a mile away. But I didn't. I was too busy setting up the sound system, arranging the furniture, and pretending everything was fine between Nina and me. Our suburban home in Millbrook, Massachusetts looked perfect that night. String lights draped across the living room, champagne chilling in the kitchen, and enough food to feed half the neighborhood. The kind of party that would make our friends jealous on social media. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Nina emerged from our bedroom at 8:30 wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. It hugged every curve of her 34-year-old body like it was painted on. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she'd done something different with her makeup that made her green eyes look almost predatory. "You look incredible," I said, trying to sound casual. "New dress?" She barely glanced at me. I bought it last week." "For tonight? Does it matter?" She walked past me toward the kitchen, her heels clicking on our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Nina Carell, she kept her maiden name for her real estate photography business, had been distant for months. Late nights at photo shoots, weekend client meetings, and a sudden obsession with fitness that had her at the gym 4 times a week. All the classic signs that I, in my infinite stupidity, had attributed to work stress. The first guests arrived at 9. Tony Martinez, my closest friend from work, showed up with his wife Beth and a bottle of expensive whiskey. Tony's one of those guys who can read a room in seconds, and I watched his face change as he took in the atmosphere between Nina and me. "Everything good, man?" he asked quietly while Beth went to find Nina. "Perfect," I lied. "Just party nerves." By 10:30, our house was packed. Nina's real estate friends dominated the living room, all perfectly dressed women in their 30s gossiping about property values and school districts. Her boss, Mike Henderson, held court near the fireplace, telling stories about million-dollar listings while eyeing the younger women with barely concealed hunger. Then Trent Malloy arrived. Trent lived 3 houses down from us, and I'd always thought he was a decent enough guy. He ran a landscaping business, had the kind of rugged good looks that made suburban wives take notice, and drove a pristine black pickup truck that he washed every weekend. He'd been engaged to Laurel Chen, a sweet social worker who volunteered at the animal shelter and brought us homemade cookies every Christmas. But Trent walked into our party alone that night, wearing jeans that cost more than my monthly car payment and a smile that made my stomach turn. "Owen," he called out, crossing the room with the confidence of a man who owned the place. "Hell of a party, buddy." He shook my hand with just a little too much pressure, his eyes already scanning the room for Nina. I watched him find her near the kitchen, watched the way her face lit up when she saw him, and felt something cold settle in my chest. "Where's Laurel?" I asked. "She's not feeling well," Trent said, not taking his eyes off my wife. "Stomach bug or something." The lie was so casual, so practiced, that I almost admired it. Almost. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of forced conversations and growing dread. I played the perfect host, refilling drinks and making small talk while keeping one eye on Nina and Trent. They weren't being obvious about it. They were too smart for that. But I could see the tension between them, the way they found excuses to brush past each other, the meaningful glances when they thought no one was looking. At 11:45, someone turned up the music and dimmed the lights. The countdown to midnight was starting, and couples began gravitating toward each other. I looked around for Nina and found her standing by the sliding door to our back deck, champagne glass in hand, staring out at the darkness. "Ready for midnight?" I asked, moving to stand beside her. She turned to look at me, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. Or maybe it was pity. "Owen," she said quietly, "we need to talk." "Now?" "After the party." The countdown began in the living room behind us. 10, 9, 8. I reached for Nina's hand, but she pulled away. 7, 6, 5. Trent appeared beside us as if summoned. 4, 3, 2. "Happy New Year, Nina," Trent said, and kissed my wife. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, not a casual New Year's kiss between neighbors. A full, passionate, tongue down her throat kiss that lasted at least 10 seconds while I stood there like an idiot, watching my marriage explode in real time. The living room erupted in cheers and celebration, but I could barely hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. When they finally broke apart, Nina looked directly at me with champagne-bright eyes and said the words that would change everything. "You're worthless, Owen. I'm leaving you for the neighbor." She was drunk, but not that drunk. Drunk enough to say it out loud, sober enough to mean every word. Around us, our friends and neighbors were laughing and taking pictures and recording videos on their phones, and I realized that my humiliation was being documented for posterity. Trent had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second. Then he shrugged and put his arm around Nina's waist, pulling her closer. "Sorry, man," he said to me. "It just happened." That was the line that broke something inside me. It just happened. Like my wife was a force of nature, like their affair was an act of God instead of a choice they'd made every single day for God knows how long. I didn't say anything. I just refilled my glass and took notes. Mental notes, the kind of notes that would matter later. The party broke up around 2 a.m. I spent the time cleaning up, collecting empty bottles and champagne flutes while Nina and Trent held court in the living room, no longer bothering to hide their relationship. I watched our friends' reactions, some shocked, some uncomfortable, some clearly unsurprised. Tony tried to talk to me twice, but I waved him off with a smile and kept cleaning. By the time the last guest left, I had a crystal clear picture of exactly where I stood. My wife was cheating on me with our neighbor. Half our social circle had known about it before I did, and I'd just been publicly humiliated in my own home by the two people I'd trusted most. Nina stumbled upstairs to our bedroom around 3, leaving Trent to show himself out. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and thinking while the house settled around me. At 6 a.m, Nina came downstairs wearing one of my old t-shirts and a hangover. She found me at the kitchen table with my laptop open, and for a moment she looked almost nervous. "Owen," she started, "about last night? What about it? I was drunk. I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean to kiss Trent? Or you didn't mean to announce you were leaving me for him?" She sat down across from me, running her hands through her tangled hair. "It was a joke. People were filming everything. I got caught up in the moment." I turned my laptop around so she could see the screen. It showed her text messages from the past 3 months, messages I'd pulled from her laptop while she was showering, messages that detailed every aspect of her relationship with Trent, from their first kiss in his truck to their plans for a weekend getaway to Vermont. Her face went white. "How did you..." "You sync your messages to your laptop automatically," I said calmly. "Has something to do with your iCloud settings. I've been reading them for 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Her voice cracked. I suspected something was wrong. I just needed proof. I closed the laptop and looked at her directly. "Joke's over, Nina." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and what her options were. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to pack your things and get out of my house." "Your house? We bought this together." "Actually, we didn't. Check the deed. It's in my name only, purchased with money from my inheritance." I stood up and refilled my coffee cup. "You have until tomorrow night?" "Owen, please, we can work this out. It was just..." "Just what? Just connection? Just an emotional affair? Just the complete destruction of our marriage?" I turned back to her, and she flinched at whatever she saw in my face. "You made your choice, Nina. Now live with it." That was the moment the nice guy faded. The moment I stopped being her husband and started being her reckoning. She tried to argue, tried to negotiate, tried to cry her way back into my good graces. But I was done. I'd spent 8 years being the understanding husband, the supportive partner, the man who put her needs before his own. I'd worked extra hours to pay for her photography equipment, covered her business expenses during slow months, and listened to her complain about clients and colleagues without ever asking for the same support in return. And this was how she repaid me. Nina finally went back upstairs around noon, claiming she needed to think. I heard her on the phone with someone, probably Trent, maybe her friend Angie, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. I didn't care. I had work to do. By the time she came back down that evening, I'd already moved our joint savings account into my name only, changed the passwords on all our shared accounts, and made some very interesting phone calls. I'd also done a little research into Trent's business practices and personal life. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. "I'm not leaving," Nina announced, standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed. "This is my home, too." "No," I said without looking up from my laptop. "It's not. I'll fight you in court." "With what money? I've frozen all our accounts." "That's illegal." "Actually, it's not. They're my accounts. I just gave you access as a courtesy." I finally looked at her and smiled. "That courtesy has been revoked." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time, and maybe she was. The Owen she'd married would never have done this. He would have begged her to stay, promised to change, offered couples counseling and second chances. But that Owen was gone. "You bastard," she whispered. "I prefer ex-husband," I replied. "Now pack your things." The next morning, I woke up alone for the first time in 8 years. Nina had spent the night in our guest room, and I could hear her moving around upstairs, presumably packing. I made coffee for one, checked my email, and started planning the next phase of my life. The first order of business was damage control. I called in sick to work, the first time I'd used a sick day in over a year, and drove to my lawyer's office. Patricia Vance had handled the legal work when I bought the house, and she was exactly the kind of sharp, no-nonsense attorney I needed right now. "Divorce?" she asked after I'd explained the situation. "Eventually. Right now, I just want to make sure she can't take half of everything I own." Patricia pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. "The house is in your name only?" "Yes. Purchased with my inheritance before we were married." "Good. What about other assets?" "My 401k is separate, my car is in my name, and I moved all the cash to a new account yesterday." I handed her a folder. "Bank statements, property deeds, everything you'll need." She flipped through the documents, nodding. "This is very thorough, Owen. Almost like you were planning for this." "I wasn't, but I'm a project manager. When something goes wrong, I fix it." "And your wife's business?" "She's a freelance photographer. No employees, no major assets. She uses my home office and my equipment for most of her work." "Which you'll be taking back, I assume?" "Already done." Patricia smiled. "You work fast." "I've had time to think." By the time I got home, Nina was loading boxes into her car. A Honda Civic that was 3 years old and had a dent in the passenger door from where she'd backed into a mailbox last summer. She looked up when I pulled into the driveway, and I could see she'd been crying. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe Trent has a spare room." "This is cruel, Owen." "No," I said, getting out of my car. "Cruel would be what you did to me last night. This is just consequences." She slammed the trunk of her car hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. "I never meant for you to get hurt." "But you knew I would." She didn't have an answer for that, which was answer enough. I watched her drive away around 3 in the afternoon, then spent the rest of the day reclaiming my house. I moved her photography equipment to the garage, changed the locks, and updated my home security system. By evening, it was like Nina Carell had never lived there at all. That night, I drove to Murphy's Pub, a local dive bar where the beer was cheap and the bartender minded her own business. Gina Murphy had owned the place for 15 years, and she had the kind of face that invited confessions. She also knew every piece of gossip in Millbrook, which made her exactly the person I needed to talk to. "Owen Barlow," she said when I walked in. "Don't usually see you without the missus." That's actually what I wanted to talk about. I ordered a beer and found a quiet corner booth. Gina brought my drink over personally, which told me she was already curious. "Heard you had quite the party last night," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Word travels fast." "Honey, in a town this size, word travels at the speed of light, especially when it involves Trent Malloy." That got my attention. "What do you mean?" Gina glanced around the bar, then leaned forward. "Let's just say your wife wasn't his first married conquest. That boy's been working his way through the neighborhood wives for years." "Anyone I know?" "Sarah Peterson, before she moved to Florida. Janet Walsh, before her husband found out and threatened to break Trent's legs. And rumor has it he's got something going with that new woman on Maple Street, the one with the fancy car." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How long has this been common knowledge?" "About Trent in general?" "Years. About him and Nina specifically?" Gina shrugged. "Maybe 6 months. I'm sorry, honey. I figured you knew and were just keeping quiet about it." 6 months. They'd been laughing at me for 6 months. "What about Laurel?" I asked. "His fiancée?" "Sweet girl. Too good for him, if you ask me. Word is she's been planning their wedding for 2 years, picking out flowers and booking venues. She has no idea what kind of man she's marrying." I finished my beer and left Gina a generous tip. "Thanks for the honesty." "Owen," she called as I stood to leave. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. Trent's got a temper when he's cornered." "So do I said. The next morning was Saturday, which meant Trent would be home working in his yard. He was obsessive about his landscaping. Every blade of grass perfectly trimmed, every flower bed geometrically precise. It was his pride and joy, the showcase that attracted new clients to his business. I waited until after midnight, then took a walk through the neighborhood. Trent's house was dark, his pristine black pickup truck parked in the driveway. His front yard was a masterpiece of suburban perfection, with expensive shrubs and decorative rocks arranged in patterns that probably cost more than most people's cars. I'd brought a bag of mulch from the garden center, along with a bottle of red landscaping dye. It took me less than 10 minutes to spell out "Home Wrecker" across his front lawn in bright red letters. The mulch would eliminate the grass underneath, and the dye would stain the soil for months. By Sunday morning, half the neighborhood had driven by to see Trent's new lawn decoration. I watched from my kitchen window as he discovered it around 8 a.m., coming out in his bathrobe to get the newspaper. His reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Pure, impotent rage. He looked directly at my house, and I raised my coffee mug in a mock toast. My phone rang 20 minutes later. "You snake," Trent snarled without preamble. "Good morning to you too, neighbor." "You think this is funny?" "I think it's accurate." "I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your vandalism complaint. Might even make the local news. Local landscaper seeks police protection after affair exposed. Has a nice ring to it." The line went quiet for a long moment. "What do you want, Owen?" "I want you to leave my wife alone." "She's not your wife anymore." "Then I guess we don't have anything to talk about." I hung up and went back to watching the show. Trent spent the next 3 hours trying to clean up his lawn, but the damage was done. The red stain had soaked deep into the soil, and the old mulch would take weeks to remove completely. Around noon, Nina's car pulled into his driveway. I watched her get out and survey the damage, then follow Trent into his house. They emerged an hour later, both looking grim, and drove away together. That afternoon, I got a call from Tony. "Dude, what the hell is going on? Beth saw Nina at Target buying suitcases. We're getting divorced." "Jesus, Owen, I'm sorry. What happened?" I gave him the condensed version. The affair, the public humiliation, Nina moving out. Tony listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I appreciated about him. "What can I do?" he asked when I finished. "Nothing. It's handled." "You sure? Because Beth says Nina's telling people you threw her out without warning, that you're being vindictive and cruel." "I'm sure she is." And I don't care what Nina says anymore." Tony was quiet for a moment. "This doesn't sound like you, man. You're usually the guy who tries to fix things." "Some things can't be fixed, Tony. Some things need to be burned down and rebuilt from scratch." That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." I texted back, "You're right, it's just getting started." Monday morning brought the first real satisfaction. I'd spent Sunday evening making a few phone calls, and the results were already paying off. Nina's boss, Mike Henderson, called me around 9 a.m. "Owen, it's Mike. I need to ask you about some photos Nina submitted for the Morrison listing." The Morrison house was a $1 million property that Nina had photographed the previous month. According to her timesheets, she'd spent 6 hours on the shoot and charged the client accordingly. "What about them?" I asked. "Well, I was reviewing the metadata on the image files, and it shows they were all taken on the same day as 3 other shoots. That would be physically impossible unless she's figured out how to be in 4 places at once." I'd pulled the metadata from Nina's camera files while she was packing. Amazing how much information digital photos contain, not just when they were taken, but where, and with what equipment. "That does sound unusual," I said. "Owen, I have to ask, did Nina use your home office to doctor these photos? Because if she's been billing clients for work she didn't actually do." "I really couldn't say, Mike. You'd have to ask her." But Mike couldn't ask her because Nina wasn't answering her phone. She'd spent the weekend at Trent's house, apparently too busy playing house with her new boyfriend to worry about little things like her career. By Tuesday, Nina's professional reputation was in free fall. Mike had suspended her pending an investigation into billing fraud, and word was spreading through the local real estate community. In a small town like Millbrook, that kind of scandal was career suicide. I also sent Laurel Chen a package that Tuesday. Copies of the text messages between Nina and Trent, along with photos from the New Year's party that clearly showed them together. I included a note. "Thought you should know what kind of man you're planning to marry." Laurel called me that evening. "Is this real?" she asked without introduction. "I'm sorry, Laurel. I thought you deserved to know." She was crying. "How long?" "At least 6 months, maybe longer. We were supposed to get married in April. I've already sent out the invitations." "I'm sorry," I said again, and meant it. Laurel was collateral damage in all this, an innocent victim of Trent's selfishness and Nina's cruelty. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to make sure they get exactly what they deserve." "Can I help?" That surprised me. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. That bastard wasted 2 years of my life. And your wife? She knew about me, didn't she? She knew he was engaged and she didn't care?" "Yeah, she knew." "Then let me help." Wednesday brought the next phase of my plan into motion. Laurel had thrown Trent out of her house. Their house, technically, since she'd been paying half the mortgage for 2 years. And he'd moved in with Nina at a cheap motel on the edge of town. The Millbrook Inn was the kind of place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask too many questions about its clientele. I drove by around lunchtime and saw Nina's Honda parked next to Trent's truck. They were staying in room 12, according to Laurel, who'd followed them there the night before. That evening, I called the front desk of the Millbrook Inn. "Hi, this is Detective Morrison with the Millbrook Police," I said, disguising my voice. "We've had reports of drug activity in room 12. Has the occupant been paying in cash?" Yes, sir. Is there a problem?" "We're investigating. Can you tell me how long they have been staying there?" 3 days, sir, but they seem like nice people." "Thank you. We'll be in touch." I hung up and smiled. I wasn't impersonating a police officer. I'd never identified myself as Detective Morrison, and anyone who assumed I was a cop based on my first name and a few leading questions was just making assumptions. But those assumptions would lead to consequences. The motel manager would be watching room 12 now, looking for signs of trouble, and when people are looking for trouble, they usually find it. Thursday morning, Nina called me for the first time since she'd moved out. "You have to stop this," she said without preamble. "Stop what?" "You know what? Mike fired me yesterday. He says I falsified billing records." "Did you? That's not the point." "Actually, that's exactly the point. Did you bill clients for work you didn't do?" Silence. "I needed the money," she said finally. "For what? Your motel room?" "Owen, please. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. I can't find work anywhere in town. People are talking." "What are they saying?" "You know what they're saying." I did know. Gina had filled me in the night before. The story was spreading through Millbrook like wildfire. Nina, the cheating wife, Trent, the serial homewrecker, and Owen, the cuckolded husband who'd finally grown a spine. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate me in front of our friends," I said. "It was one kiss." "It was 6 months of lies, Nina. Don't insult my intelligence." She started crying then, the kind of manipulative tears she'd used to get her way for years. But I was immune to them now. "I loved you," she whispered. "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me, the stable husband with the steady income and the nice house. But you never loved me. That's not true. Prove it. Tell me one thing you loved about me that wasn't about what I could provide for you." The silence stretched for almost a minute. "I have to go," she said finally. "Yeah," I said, "you do." Friday brought the first real confrontation. I came home from work to find Nina's Honda in my driveway and the front door standing open. She was in my office, my former home office, rifling through the filing cabinet. "Looking for something?" I asked from the doorway. She spun around, her face flushed with guilt and desperation. "These are my business files." "Were," past tense. I stepped into the room, noting that she'd already gone through my desk drawers. "Find anything interesting?" "I need my client contact list." "No, you don't. You don't have any clients anymore, remember?" She straightened up, trying to regain some dignity. "I have a right to my own property." "Actually, you don't. You moved out, remember? Voluntarily. That makes this breaking and entering." "I still have a key." "Had. Past tense." I held up the new key I'd had made. "I changed the locks on Tuesday." Her face went white. "How did I get in?" "Good question. I'm guessing you broke the lock on the back door. That's actual breaking and entering, Nina. A felony." She looked toward the back of the house, probably calculating whether she could make it to the door before I stopped her. I was blocking the office doorway, and she'd have to get past me to reach the main hallway. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to leave my house and never come back." "Owen, please. I just need my client files. I can start over somewhere else, maybe in Springfield or Worcester, but I need those contacts." "Start over?" I laughed, and the sound made her flinch. "Nina, you don't get to start over. You get to live with the consequences of your choices." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice. Every day for 6 months, you chose to lie to me. You chose to sneak around with our neighbor. You chose to humiliate me in front of our friends. And now you're choosing to break into my house." I pulled out my phone. "Should I choose to call the police?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if I was bluffing. "You've changed," she said finally. "Yeah, I have. Turns out getting betrayed by the person you trust most has that effect on people." "This isn't you, Owen. You're not cruel." "I'm not being cruel, I'm being fair. You wanted out of our marriage? You're out. You wanted to be with Trent? Go be with Trent. But you don't get to keep me as a backup plan." She tried a different approach, stepping closer and softening her voice. "We had 8 good years together. That has to count for something." "It does count. It counts as 8 years I'll never get back." The manipulation attempt failed, and I watched her face harden. This was the real Nina, the one I'd been married to all along but had been too stupid to recognize. You can't keep my business files. I earned those contacts. Using my equipment in my office with my internet connection, technically I think that makes them work product created on company time. You're not a company? No, but I was your business partner. 50-50 split on all expenses, remember? That makes me entitled to 50% of all assets. I smiled. I'll take the client list as my share. She lunged for the filing cabinet, but I was ready for her. I grabbed her wrist and spun her away from the files, not hard enough to hurt her, but firmly enough to make my point. Don't, I said quietly. She jerked her hand free and backed toward the window. You can't do this. I already did it. Your choice now is whether you leave quietly or I call the police and have you arrested for breaking and entering. They won't arrest me. I lived here. Past tense, Nina, and breaking into your ex-husband's house is still a crime, even if you used to live there. She stared at me for another moment, then pushed past me toward the hallway. I followed her to make sure she actually left, and watched her examine the back door on her way out. The lock was definitely broken. She'd used a screwdriver to jimmy it open. Send me a bill for the lock, she called over her shoulder. I'll add it to what you owe me for 8 years of marriage. She got in her car and drove away, tires squealing on the asphalt. I made a note to call a locksmith in the morning, then went back to my office to see what she'd been looking for. The filing cabinet was a mess, papers scattered everywhere. But Nina had never been very organized, and she'd obviously been in a hurry. She'd missed the most important files, the ones I'd moved to a safety deposit box the previous week. My phone rang an hour later. Trent. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. Nina says you threatened her. Nina says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. Meet me at Murphy's in an hour. Or what? Or I'll come to your house. I wouldn't recommend that. I just had to fix a broken lock, and I'm not in the mood for more home repairs. 1 hour, Owen. Don't make me come find you. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone for a moment, then started laughing. Trent Malloy, the big tough landscaper, was trying to intimidate me. The same man who'd spent Sunday morning scrubbing red dye out of his precious lawn. I drove to Murphy's early and claimed the same corner booth I'd used the week before. Gina brought me a beer without being asked. Expecting company? She asked. Unfortunately. Anyone I should worry about? Trent Malloy. Her face darkened. That boy's been trouble since high school. You want me to stick around? I can handle him. I'm sure you can. But holler if you need backup. Trent arrived 20 minutes later, wearing work clothes and a scowl. He looked around the bar, spotted me in the corner, and walked over with the kind of swagger that was supposed to be intimidating. Owen. Trent, how's the lawn? His jaw tightened. Funny. I thought so. He slid into the booth across from me, and I got my first close look at him since New Year's Eve. He was still handsome in that rugged, blue-collar way that attracted certain types of women, but there were new lines around his eyes, and his clothes looked like he'd been sleeping in them. This has to stop, he said. What has to stop? You know what? The harassment, the vandalism, whatever you did to get Nina fired. I didn't get Nina fired. Nina got Nina fired by falsifying billing records. She made a few mistakes. She committed fraud. There's a difference. Trent leaned forward, trying to look threatening. She's been through enough. Has she? Because from where I'm sitting, she's just getting started. What's that supposed to mean? I took a sip of my beer and studied him. Up close, I could see the cracks in his façade. The confident swagger was mostly for show, and underneath it was a man who was starting to realize he'd bitten off more than he could chew. It means Nina comes with baggage now. Professional baggage, social baggage, legal baggage. Are you sure you're ready for all that? I can handle it. Can you? Because word around town is that your business is already suffering. Amazing how many clients suddenly don't need landscaping services when they find out their contractor is a home wrecker. His face flushed red. You've been spreading lies. I haven't said a word to anyone about your business. I didn't have to. People talk, Trent. Especially in a town this size. What do you want? I want you to leave me alone. I want you to stop sending Nina to break into my house. And I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. This isn't over. You're right, I said calmly. It's just getting started. He stalked out of the bar, leaving his untouched beer on the table. Gina appeared a moment later. Everything okay? Perfect. He looked upset. He should be. His life is about to get very complicated. Saturday morning brought a pleasant surprise. I was having coffee on my back deck when I heard raised voices from the direction of Trent's house. I walked to the edge of my property and saw Nina and Trent in his driveway, having what appeared to be a very heated argument. I couldn't make out the words, but the body language was clear. Nina was gesturing wildly, pointing at his house and then at her car. Trent had his arms crossed and was shaking his head. Whatever she wanted, he wasn't giving it to her. The argument lasted about 10 minutes before Nina got in her Honda and drove away, leaving Trent standing alone in his driveway. He looked in my direction and saw me watching. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the suburban landscape. Then I raised my coffee mug in another mock toast. He flipped me off and went back inside his house. That afternoon, Laurel called. "They're fighting," she said without preamble. I noticed. She wants him to give her money for a security deposit on an apartment. He says he's broke because his business is failing. How do you know all this? I may have planted a small recording device in his truck before I threw him out. I laughed, despite myself. That's probably illegal. So is adultery, technically, at least in Massachusetts. Good point. What else did you find out? Nina's been calling her friends, trying to get someone to let her stay with them temporarily. No one's returning her calls. Shocking. She also called her sister in California. That conversation got interesting. How so? Apparently this isn't the first time Nina's had an affair. Her sister mentioned something about pulling the same crap you did in Denver. That was news to me. Nina had lived in Denver before we met, working for a photography studio. She'd always been vague about why she'd left Colorado, claiming she wanted a fresh start on the East Coast. Now I was wondering what kind of fresh start she'd really needed. Laurel, I said, how far are you willing to take this? What do you mean? I mean, are you interested in making sure they get exactly what they deserve? I'm listening. Meet me tomorrow night. I have an idea. Sunday evening, Laurel and I met at a coffee shop in the next town over. She looked different than I remembered, harder somehow, like the sweet social worker had been replaced by someone with sharper edges. You look good, I said as she sat down across from me. I look angry. That works too. She ordered a latte and got straight to business. What's your plan? How much do you know about Trent's business finances? Everything. I helped him set up his bookkeeping system 2 years ago. And? And he's been cutting corners for years. Unlicensed workers, unreported income, a few jobs where he took deposits and never finished the work. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. Nothing major, but enough to get him in trouble if the right people started asking questions. What kind of trouble? Tax trouble, labor law trouble, maybe some civil suits from unhappy customers. Hypothetically, if someone were to report these violations to the appropriate authorities, what would happen? Hypothetically, Trent's business would be shut down while they investigated. He'd probably face fines, back taxes, and lawsuits. Could take years to sort out. And in the meantime? In the meantime, he'd be unemployed and facing serious legal bills. I smiled. That sounds like exactly what he deserves. There's more, Laurel said. I also know about his other activities. Such as? The married women aren't his only side business. He's been selling marijuana to some of his clients. Nothing major, just an ounce here and there, but it's enough to add drug charges to his other problems. How do you know about that? I found his stash when I was packing his things. About 2 pounds of high-grade cannabis hidden in our garage, along with scales and baggies. What did you do with it? It's in a very safe place. Safe enough to be found by the right people at the right time? Absolutely. We spent the next hour planning the details. Laurel would handle the business violations. She had copies of all his records and knew exactly which agencies to contact. I would handle Nina's remaining professional connections and make sure her reputation was permanently destroyed. What about the drugs? I asked as we prepared to leave. Leave that to me. I know exactly how to handle that problem. Laurel, I need to ask, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back. She looked at me with eyes that were harder than diamonds. Owen, that man wasted 2 years of my life. He made me plan a wedding, pick out a dress, send invitations to my family. He let me believe we had a future together while he was screwing half the neighborhood. And Nina? Your wife knew he was engaged. She knew I existed, and she didn't care. She helped him lie to me every single day. Laurel finished her latte and stood up. They deserve whatever happens to them. Then let's give them exactly what they deserve. As we walked to our cars, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. For the first time since New Year's Eve, I was looking forward to tomorrow. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. Monday morning started with a phone call that made my entire week. Patricia Vance, my lawyer, had news about Nina's financial situation. She's broke, Patricia said without preamble. Completely, utterly broke. Her business accounts are empty, she's 3 months behind on her car payments, and she's been using credit cards to pay for basic expenses. How broke? Negative broke. She owes more than she owns by about $15,000. I sat back in my office chair, processing this information. How was that possible? She was bringing in decent money from her photography business. Was being the operative phrase. Apparently she's been living beyond her means for months, probably trying to impress your neighbor. New clothes, expensive dinners, that kind of thing. What about the motel? She can't afford it much longer. My guess is she's got maybe a week before they kick her out. This was better than I'd hoped. Nina wasn't just professionally ruined. She was financially destroyed. And Trent, the man she'd thrown away her marriage for, was about to discover that his new girlfriend came with serious financial baggage. There's more, Patricia continued. She tried to apply for a credit card yesterday using your address. The application was flagged because the address doesn't match her current residence. She's using my address for credit applications? Apparently. I've already contacted the credit agencies to make sure she can't use your information for anything else. After I hung up with Patricia, I called Laurel. How did it go with the Labor Department? I asked. Better than expected. They're opening a formal investigation into Trent's business practices. Someone will be contacting him this week. And the tax people. That'll take longer, but they're interested, especially when I mentioned the unreported income. What about the other thing? Tonight. I've already made the call. That evening, I drove past the Millbrook Inn and saw 3 police cars in the parking lot. Through the window of room 12, I could see uniformed officers searching through boxes and suitcases. Nina was standing outside in handcuffs, crying. Trent was nowhere to be seen. I parked across the street and called Laurel. Did you see the news? She asked. I'm watching it live. What happened? Anonymous tip about drug activity in room 12. The police found 2 pounds of marijuana in Nina's suitcase. Her suitcase? Trent's not stupid. He moved the drugs to her car yesterday, probably figured if they got caught, she'd take the fall. And did she? Oh, yes. She's being charged with possession with intent to distribute. That's a felony. I watched Nina being loaded into the back of a police car, still crying and protesting her innocence. The irony was perfect. She'd spent months lying to me, and now no one would believe her when she was actually telling the truth. Where's Trent? I asked. Long gone. His truck disappeared about an hour before the police arrived. He abandoned her? Like a sinking ship. Turns out your neighbor isn't the loyal type. Tuesday brought the next phase of my plan into action. The annual Millbrook Spring Festival was this weekend, and I'd volunteered to help with the technical setup. Specifically, I'd offered to manage the projection system they used for community announcements and sponsor advertisements. What the festival committee didn't know was that I had my own presentation planned. I spent Tuesday evening preparing a slideshow titled Nina's Best Property Shots. It featured screenshots of her text messages with Trent, photos from the New Year's party, and copies of the fraudulent billing records that had gotten her fired. I'd blurred out any truly private details, but left enough visible to tell the complete story of her affair and professional misconduct. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. During the festival's opening ceremony on Saturday, I would have complete control of the projection system. One accidentally uploaded file, one mistakenly clicked presentation, and Nina's dirty laundry would be displayed for the entire town to see. Wednesday brought more good news. Tony called me at work with an update on the neighborhood gossip. Dude, you're not going to believe this, he said. Trent Malloy skipped town. What do you mean? I mean he's gone. Packed up his truck and disappeared sometime Monday night. Left Nina to face the drug charges alone. Where did he go? Nobody knows. But get this, he owes 3 months of rent on his house, and he stiffed at least 4 clients on landscaping jobs. People are pissed. This was even better than I'd hoped. Trent hadn't just abandoned Nina, he'd burned every bridge in Millbrook on his way out of town. What about Nina? Still in jail, as far as I know. Couldn't make bail. Couldn't or wouldn't? Couldn't. Word is she's completely broke. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Nina's voice, thin and desperate. Owen, it's me. I know. I'm in jail. I heard. The drugs weren't mine. Trent put them in my car. Probably. You believe me? It doesn't matter what I believe, Nina. It matters what the police believe. She was quiet for a moment. I need help. No, you don't. You need a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford bail. I can't afford anything. Her voice cracked. Owen, please. I know I hurt you, but I'm begging you. Help me. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. This was the woman I'd loved for 8 years, the woman I'd planned to grow old with. She was sitting in a jail cell, abandoned by her lover, facing felony charges for crimes she probably didn't commit. Then I remembered New Year's Eve. I remembered the kiss, the public humiliation, The months of lies and betrayal. "Nina," I said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me at our party?" "Owen, you said I was worthless. You said you were leaving me for the neighbor. You said it in front of our friends in our house while they recorded it on their phones. I was drunk. You were honest. Maybe for the first time in months, you were completely honest about how you felt about me. That's not true. Then prove it. Tell me one reason I should help you that isn't about what you need from me." The silence stretched for almost a minute. "I can't," she whispered finally. "I know. Owen, please. Goodbye, Nina." I hung up and turned off my phone. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of festival preparations. I tested the projection system multiple times, making sure everything would work perfectly on Saturday. I also made a few strategic phone calls, ensuring that the right people would be in attendance for the opening ceremony. Mike Henderson would be there. Nina's former boss was one of the festival sponsors. Angie Walsh, Nina's best friend, was helping with the food booths. Even some of Nina's former clients had been invited as VIP guests. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the spring festival. I arrived at the town square early to make final preparations for the technical setup. The projection screen was mounted on the bandstand, visible from anywhere in the square. By noon, the festival was in full swing. Families wandered between food booths and craft vendors, children played on the inflatable bounce houses, and local politicians worked the crowd with practiced smiles. The opening ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock, when attendance would be at its peak. At 1:30, I took my position at the control booth and began the final system checks. Everything was ready. At exactly 2 o'clock, Mayor Davidson took the microphone to welcome everyone to the festival. I started the official presentation, sponsor logos, community announcements, the usual municipal propaganda. Then, at 2:15, I accidentally clicked the wrong file. The screen filled with Nina's text messages to Trent, enlarged to 20 feet wide and perfectly legible from anywhere in the square. The crowd fell silent as they read message after message detailing the affair, the lies, and the elaborate deception Nina and Trent had constructed. "Oh my God," someone shouted. "Is that Nina Carell?" The messages were followed by photos from the New Year's party, showing Nina and Trent kissing while I stood in the background like a fool. Then came the billing records, clearly showing how Nina had defrauded her clients. I let the slideshow run for exactly 3 minutes before switching back to the official presentation. "Technical difficulties," I announced over the sound system. "Sorry about that, folks." But the damage was done. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, phones were out recording everything, and I could see Nina's former friends huddled together in shocked conversation. Mike Henderson pushed through the crowd to the control booth. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "Computer glitch," I said innocently. "Sometimes old files get mixed in with the new ones." "Those were private documents." "Were they? They looked like business records to me. Aren't those public information?" Mike stared at me for a moment, then stalked away. I watched him make a beeline for Angie Walsh, probably to do damage control, but it was too late for damage control. The story was already spreading through the crowd like wildfire. By evening, videos of the accidental slideshow were all over social media. Nina's humiliation was complete and very, very public. Sunday morning brought the final piece of satisfaction. Patricia called with news about Nina's legal situation. She took a plea deal, Patricia said, pleaded guilty to simple possession in exchange for dropping the intent to distribute charge. What's her sentence? 6 months probation, community service, and a $5,000 fine. Can she afford the fine? Not even close. She'll probably have to do additional community service instead. And her record? Permanent. She'll never work in real estate again, and most photography clients do background checks these days. I hung up the phone and smiled. Nina's professional life was over, her social life was destroyed, and her criminal record would follow her forever. She'd gotten exactly what she deserved. That afternoon, I was working in my garden when Laurel appeared at my fence. "Heard about yesterday," she said. "Nice work." "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't," she smiled. "Trent called me last night." "From where?" "Florida, apparently. He wanted to know if I'd take him back." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd rather date a rattlesnake. At least rattlesnakes warn you before they strike." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun set over our quiet suburban neighborhood. "What happens now?" Laurel asked. "Now they live with the consequences of their choices." "And us?" "We move on." "Think they learned their lesson?" I thought about Nina sitting in a jail cell, abandoned and broke. I thought about Trent hiding in Florida, his business destroyed and his reputation in ruins. "They learned something," I said. Whether it was the right lesson remains to be seen. But honestly, I didn't care what they'd learned. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. The difference was I could live with the consequences of my actions. They were about to discover if they could live with theirs. 3 weeks after the festival, I thought it was over. Nina was serving her community service at a homeless shelter downtown, picking up trash and cleaning bathrooms for 8 hours a day. Trent was still hiding in Florida, according to Laurel, working construction jobs under a fake name to avoid the warrant that had been issued for his arrest on tax evasion charges. I'd settled into a comfortable routine, work during the day, quiet evenings at home, occasional dinners with Tony and Beth. The house felt peaceful without Nina's constant drama, and I was sleeping better than I had in months. Then Angie Walsh called. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "No, we don't." "Yes, we do. Meet me at Murphy's tonight at 8, or I'm going to make your life very complicated." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, wondering what Nina's former best friend could possibly want with me. Angie had been one of the ringleaders in Nina's social circle, the kind of woman who thrived on gossip and drama. She was also married to a successful contractor and had never worked a day in her life. I arrived at Murphy's early and claimed my usual booth. Gina brought me a beer and lingered longer than necessary. "You expecting trouble?" she asked. "Maybe. Angie Walsh wants to talk." Gina's face darkened. "That woman's been poisoned since high school. What does she want?" "I'm about to find out." Angie arrived precisely at 8, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She looked around the bar with obvious distaste before sliding into the booth across from me. "Owen." "Angie." "You look good. Relaxed." "I am relaxed." She smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Enjoy it while it lasts." "What do you want, Angie?" She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table between us. "I want to show you something interesting." She swiped to a video file and hit play. The screen showed grainy footage of someone moving around in darkness, apparently taken from a security camera. It took me a moment to realize I was looking at myself, spreading red mulch across Trent's lawn 3 weeks ago. "Interesting home movie," I said calmly. "I thought so too, especially since vandalism is a crime." "Is it? I thought it was just landscaping. The police might see it differently." I took a sip of my beer and studied her. Angie Walsh was many things: shallow, vindictive, manipulative, but she wasn't stupid. She wouldn't have come here without a plan. "What do you want?" I asked again. "I want you to leave Nina alone." "Nina's in jail, Angie. I'm not doing anything to her." "You destroyed her life." "No, I exposed her lies. There's a difference." Angie leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She's my friend, Owen. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve what you've done to her." She made a choice. Several thousand choices, actually, over the course of 6 months. Everyone deserves a second chance. Sure they do. They just don't deserve it from the person they betrayed. Angie sat back, her mask of concern slipping slightly. "You're not the man Nina married." "You're right. I'm better." "You're cruel." "I'm fair." She picked up her phone and swiped to another file. "This one shows you breaking into Trent's truck. That's a felony, Owen." I looked at the new video, which showed me placing something in the bed of Trent's pickup truck. It was dark and grainy, but clearly identifiable. "When did you become Trent's security service?" I asked. "I've been keeping an eye on the neighborhood since all this drama started. Amazing what you can see from my bedroom window." "Amazing what you think you can see." "The police will be very interested in these videos." "Will they? Because I'm pretty sure what you're describing is called stalking, and recording your neighbors without their consent is illegal in Massachusetts." Her confidence faltered slightly. "It's a security camera." "Pointed at other people's property. That's voyeurism, Angie. Also illegal." "You can't prove that." "Actually, I can." I pulled out my own phone and showed her a photo I'd taken the previous week. It clearly showed a camera mounted in her bedroom window, aimed directly at Trent's house. "I've been documenting your little surveillance operation for days." Her face went pale. "You've been watching me?" "I've been protecting myself. Amazing how paranoid you get when your neighbors start acting suspicious." "This is ridiculous. I'm trying to help Nina." "No, you're trying to blackmail me. There's a difference." Angie stared at me for a long moment, clearly recalculating her approach. "What do you want to make this go away?" "Nothing. Because you're not going to the police." "Why not?" "Because you're as dirty as Nina and Trent." I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "Remember when Nina was doing those fake photo shoots? The ones that got her fired for billing fraud?" What about them? She wasn't working alone. Someone was helping her doctor the timestamps on the photos, someone with access to professional editing software. I opened the folder to reveal bank records and email printouts. Someone who was getting paid 20% of the fraudulent billing. Angie's face went white. You can't prove that. Bank transfers from Nina's business account to your personal account, always exactly 20% of her fraudulent invoices. Email conversations discussing which clients would be easiest to fool, and my personal favorite, a text message where you suggest billing the Morrison job twice because the client is too rich to notice. Where did you get these? Nina wasn't very good at covering her tracks. Neither were you. Angie grabbed for the folder, but I pulled it back. That's just copies. The originals are in a very safe place. What do you want? I want you to delete those videos and forget you ever saw them. And if I don't? Then I send this file to the district attorney's office. Fraud conspiracy is a felony, Angie. You'd be looking at the same charges as Nina, plus whatever penalties come with your little surveillance hobby. She stared at the folder like it was a poisonous snake. You bastard! I prefer thorough. Nina was right about you. You are worthless. Maybe, but I'm not a criminal. Angie deleted the videos while I watched, then stormed out of the bar without another word. Gina appeared a moment later. Everything okay? Perfect. She looked upset. She should be. Her blackmail career just ended before it started. But I was wrong about it being over. 2 days later, I came home from work to find my front door standing open and voices coming from inside the house. I recognized them immediately, Nina and Trent. I parked across the street and called 911. I'd like to report a break-in in progress, I told the dispatcher. 2 people have broken into my house at 47 Maple Street. Are you in the house, sir? No, I'm outside, but I can see them moving around inside. We'll have units there in 5 minutes. Please stay in your vehicle until the officers arrive. I had no intention of staying in my car, but I didn't tell the dispatcher that. Instead, I walked quietly to my backyard and listened at the kitchen window. Told you this was a stupid idea, Trent was saying. We need that money, Nina replied. It's the only way I can pay the fine. There is no money, Nina. Owen cleaned out all the accounts weeks ago. There has to be something. Jewelry, electronics, something we can sell. And then what? We're both wanted by the police. You're on probation, and I've got warrants in 3 states. We'll figure it out. I heard footsteps moving toward the front of the house, then the sound of drawers being opened and closed. They were searching my office, looking for anything valuable they could steal. The police arrived exactly 5 minutes later, 3 patrol cars with lights flashing. I met them at the front door. Owen Barlow, I said to the lead officer. I'm the homeowner. You reported a break-in? That's right. 2 people, a man and a woman. They're in my office. Do you know who they are? My ex-wife and her boyfriend. They've been harassing me for weeks. The officers entered the house with weapons drawn. I heard shouting from the office, then the sound of handcuffs clicking. Clear, someone called. They brought Nina and Trent out in handcuffs. Nina was crying again, mascara streaming down her face. Trent looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him. Owen, Nina pleaded, please. We just needed... Save it, I said. Tell it to the judge. Sir, the lead officer said to me, do you want to press charges? Absolutely. Breaking and entering, burglary, violation of probation for her, he said, making notes. He's got outstanding warrants, so he's going back to Massachusetts for trial. What about Florida? I asked. He'll face charges there too, once Massachusetts is done with him. They loaded Nina and Trent into separate patrol cars. As they were driving away, Nina looked back at me through the rear window. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Complete defeat. That evening, Laurel came by with a bottle of wine. Heard about the excitement, she said. Word travels fast. In a town this size, it travels at light speed. She opened the wine and poured 2 glasses. How do you feel? Tired. Satisfied? I thought about it. Yeah, satisfied. They're both going to prison, you know. Nina violated her probation, and Trent's got enough charges to keep him locked up for years. Good. We sat on my back deck, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. It was peaceful, quiet, normal, everything it hadn't been for months. What happens now? Laurel asked. Now I get on with my life. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. Did I regret destroying Nina's career? No. Did I regret exposing Trent's criminal activities? No. Did I regret the public humiliation at the festival? Not even a little bit. None, I said finally. Even though they're going to prison? They're going to prison because they committed crimes. I didn't make them break into my house, Laurel. I didn't make them steal from clients or sell drugs or violate probation. They made those choices all by themselves. And if they hadn't, then they'd be living with the social and professional consequences of their affair, which is exactly what they deserved. Laurel nodded. Fair enough. We finished our wine in comfortable silence. Around 10 o'clock, she gathered her things to leave. Owen, she said at the door. Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you handled this perfectly. Thanks. Nina and Trent thought they could have their cake and eat it too. They thought they could betray the people who loved them and face no real consequences. They were wrong. Very wrong. After she left, I sat in my living room and thought about the past month. A month ago, I'd been a cuckolded husband, publicly humiliated and privately devastated. Tonight, I was a free man with a clean house and a clear conscience. Nina and Trent had wanted drama. They'd wanted passion and excitement and the thrill of forbidden romance. Instead, they'd gotten exactly what they deserved.